I've only told this story once before, and even then I left a lot out. It's the kind of thing that burrows into your memory and festers there, growing more grotesque the more you think about it. It's been years since it happened, and over a decade now, but I can still smell the pine needles and gasoline, still hear the crunch of boots on gravel behind me, still feel the hot breath on my neck when I thought I was safe. This was back in my junior year of high school. Our biology class had planned a weekend field trip to a nature reserve about 3 hours away from town. It was supposed to be a fun, educational wilderness experience, hiking, studying local flora and fauna, and camping in cabins near the edge of the forest. I'd never been much of an outdoors person, but I liked the idea of getting away for a few days. It was November, cold, damp, and perfect for huddling around campfires and swapping scary stories. There were about 20 of us on the trip, plus 3 teachers and a guide from the reserve. We were split into cabins by gender, 4 per room. I was bunking with my 2 best friends, Evan and Mike, and a quiet kid named Joel who barely spoke to anyone. Everything about the trip started off normal enough. The bus ride was loud and chaotic, full of jokes and music and snacks. The first day was mostly hiking and identifying plant species. That night we made s'mores under a sky full of stars so clear it felt like we were floating in space. It was the second night when things started to feel wrong. We'd spent the day trekking deeper into the reserve, learning about animal tracking and survival basics. By evening we were exhausted, dirty, and ready for sleep. I remember waking up sometime after midnight to go to the bathroom. The cabin had no plumbing, so we had to walk a short distance to a shared outhouse. The woods were silent except for the occasional rustle of wind in the trees. My flashlight beam wobbled in front of me as I trudged through the cold air. That's when I saw him. About 30 yards away, near the edge of the tree line, a man was standing completely still. He wasn't part of our group, I knew that immediately. He was taller, older, maybe mid-40s, wearing a long, dark jacket that hung almost to his knees. He was facing the cabins, not moving, just watching. I froze mid-step, every hair on my body standing on end. For a moment I thought I was imagining it, and maybe just a shadow or a tree stump. But then he shifted slightly, tilting his head like he was studying me. I turned and bolted back to the cabin without even using the bathroom. "Dude, what's wrong?" Mike mumbled groggily when I slammed the door. "Someone's out there," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Who?" "I don't know, a man. Just standing there. Watching." We pressed our faces to the small cabin window, but by then the clearing was empty. No movement. No figure, nothing. "Probably just a ranger or something," Evan muttered, pulling the blanket over his head. But I couldn't shake the image of that man's stillness, the way his head tilted like he was curious about us. The next morning I told our teacher, Mrs. Callahan, what I'd seen. She frowned but tried to reassure me. "It's probably one of the park staff doing rounds. They monitor the area at night sometimes." Still, she promised to let the reserve's guide know. By afternoon, I'd almost convinced myself it had been nothing. We hiked again, ate dinner, and even told ghost stories by the fire. Everything felt normal, until later that night. I woke up to the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunching on the gravel just outside our cabin. My heart hammered against my ribs. At first, I thought it was one of the teachers checking on us, but then I heard a faint scrape against the door, like someone dragging their nails down the wood. I sat up, listening. The others were asleep. Another scrape. Then a soft, deliberate tap against the window. I held my breath. The tapping came again. 3 sharp knocks against the glass. And then, in the faint moonlight, I saw a shape pass by the window. It wasn't a ranger. It wasn't a teacher. It was the same tall man I'd seen the night before. "Wake up," I hissed, shaking Mike's shoulder. He groaned and sat up. "What the hell, man? Someone's outside." "The same guy." The 4 of us pressed ourselves against the cabin wall, listening as the footsteps circled the building. Then silence. Just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. We barely slept that night. The next morning, everyone was on edge. Other students had heard noises too. Footsteps, branches breaking, whispers. One girl swore she'd seen someone moving between the trees before sunrise. Mrs. Callahan was concerned now. She called the reserve office, but they insisted no rangers were patrolling near our site. Could be a local hiker, they said. Or maybe someone camping nearby. But there were no other campsites for miles. That night, the teachers decided we'd all stay in the main lodge together. Safety in numbers. The lodge was bigger and sturdier with lockable doors and windows. It made us feel a little better. We set up sleeping bags in the main room, joked nervously, and tried to laugh it off. Around 1 a.m., the power went out. The entire building plunged into darkness. Someone screamed. Mrs. Callahan's voice cut through the panic. "Stay calm. Stay together." Flashlights flicked on one by one, beams cutting through the blackness. And that's when the banging started. At first it was distant, somewhere at the back of the lodge. Then it moved, slamming against the doors and windows in different places, circling us. Someone was trying to get in. "Is it a bear?" Evan whispered.
"No," I muttered.
"It's him." The banging stopped. Then we heard footsteps on the roof. Slow, deliberate, moving directly above us. One of the windows shattered suddenly and cold air rushed in. Mrs. Callahan shouted for everyone to stay down as a teacher ran to barricade the broken window with a table. For the next hour, it was chaos. Footsteps outside, glass breaking. The faint sound of someone laughing. Not loud, but low and raspy, like whoever it was enjoying this. When morning finally came, the noises stopped. The power flickered back on. And when we stepped outside, there was no sign of anyone. No footprints, no damage beyond the broken glass. Like nothing had happened at all. The reserve staff called the local sheriff, who did a sweep of the area. They found nothing. No campsites, no signs of intrusion, nothing to suggest anyone had been there. But I knew better. I saw him again, just once as the bus pulled away from the reserve later that day. He was standing at the tree line watching us leave. Same dark coat, same tilted head. For weeks afterward, I couldn't sleep. I'd jolt awake at every noise, convinced someone was outside my window. It got worse when I started finding things on my porch. A small pine cone, a rusted pocket knife, a piece of glass that looked like it had come from a cabin window. It felt like he was trying to remind me he was still out there, that he knew where I lived. I eventually told my parents and they filed a police report, but nothing came of it. They installed cameras, motion lights, the usual. The visit stopped eventually, but I never really stopped feeling watched. Even now, a decade later, I still sometimes catch myself looking toward the tree line behind my house at night. Because here's the thing that keeps me up. We were 3 hours from home, deep in the wilderness. Whoever that man was, he would have had to follow us back, and I'm terrified he did. I used to think school trips were the safest kind of adventure. You're surrounded by classmates, teachers, and chaperones. What could possibly go wrong? That's exactly what I thought before our senior year trip to Black Hollow Historical Village. I wish to God we'd never gone. It was supposed to be a fun, slightly boring educational getaway. Black Hollow was this reconstructed 1800s settlement about 4 hours from our town. Cabins, shops, even actors dressed like pioneers. The trip was part of our American history curriculum. 3 days and 2 nights of living like people did 2 centuries ago. No phones, no electricity, no Wi-Fi. At 17, that was basically torture. But I figured I'd survive. I didn't know then that I'd be lucky to survive. There were about 30 of us juniors and seniors on the trip. We were divided into cabins built to mimic 19th century houses. Wood-planked walls, fireplaces, oil lamps. My roommates were my best friends, Liam and Casey, plus a quiet kid named Brandon who barely talked to anyone. The first day went by uneventfully. We milked cows, baked bread, and watched demonstrations on blacksmithing and candle making. It was kitschy and dull, but harmless. That night, we sat around a massive bonfire while one of the guides told ghost stories about the village's dark past. It was the first time I'd heard about Elias Crow. According to legend, Crow was the town's undertaker back in the mid-1800s, a respected man by day but a monster by night. Rumor had it he dug up freshly buried corpses, experimented on them, even wore pieces of them. The townspeople eventually discovered his crimes and burned his cabin to the ground with him still inside. They say his spirit still wanders Black Hollow, searching for new specimens. It was the usual campfire nonsense. We all laughed, rolled our eyes, and went to bed. But something happened. That night that still makes my stomach turn. I woke up around 2:30 a.m. to the sound of footsteps on the porch outside our cabin, slow, measured, heavy. At first, I thought it was one of the teachers making rounds, but then I heard breathing. Deep, labored, like someone struggling to inhale. I shook Liam awake. "Do you hear that?" He rubbed his eyes. Hear what? Thud. Footsteps moved past the window. Then came a soft scraping noise against the glass like fingernails dragging across it. Casey bolted upright. What the hell is that? We all froze. The scraping stopped. Silence. And then, very slowly, a shape leaned into view outside the window. The glass was foggy, but I could see the outline of a face, pale and too long, like the features were stretched. Whoever it was pressed their forehead against the pane and stared inside. We couldn't see the eyes clearly, but we could feel them. Watching, we screamed, of course. Liam threw a boot at the window and the figure vanished into the darkness. The teachers searched the grounds, but they found nothing. Probably a prank, they said. One of the other students trying to scare you. But I saw the look on Mrs. Powell's face. She didn't believe that either. The next day was worse. We were split into groups for a scavenger hunt around the village. My team, me, Casey, and Brandon, got assigned the cemetery. It was small, maybe a dozen gravestones, some cracked and leaning. The guide warned us not to wander beyond the fence line. We were about halfway through the hunt when I noticed something off. One of the graves, a newer one with a wooden marker, looked like it had been disturbed. The soil was fresh and the ground was uneven, like it had been dug up recently. I crouched down and touched the dirt. It was cold and damp, and something beneath the surface shifted when I pressed down. "Dude, stop," Casey said, backing away. "That's not part of the scavenger hunt," but I couldn't help it. I brushed a bit more dirt away and saw skin, not a full body but a patch of grayish flesh with hair clinging to it. It looked real. We screamed for help. The teachers came running. When they dug deeper, though, there was nothing there. No body, no flesh, nothing. Just loose soil. Like it had never been disturbed at all. They wrote it off as our imaginations. Probably a root, they said. But Brandon looked pale. "It wasn't a root," he whispered. I felt it move. That night, no one slept. Not after what happened next. Around midnight, the air in the cabin turned cold. Unnaturally cold. I woke up to see my breath fogging in front of my face. The fire had long since died. But this wasn't just nighttime chill. It was freezing. Then came the footsteps again. Slow, heavy, pacing around the cabin. We didn't move. Didn't speak. The doorknob rattled once, twice, then silence. And then 3 sharp knocks on the door. "Knock, knock, knock, go away," Casey shouted. The knocking stopped. Then we heard whispering. A man's voice, low and raspy, speaking words I couldn't understand. The handle turned again, and this time it clicked. The door creaked open. I swear to God. Someone stepped inside. The lantern light was dim, but I saw him clearly. A tall figure in a dark coat, his face pale and stretched and stitched. It looked like patches of different skin sewn together, with eyes too dark to be human. He tilted his head, sniffed the air, and smiled. A slow, unnatural grin that split his face almost in half. We screamed and dove under our blankets like little kids. When the teachers burst in seconds later, the room was empty. The door was still closed, locked from the inside. Just a nightmare, they said. Mass hysteria. But I knew better. We all did. The final night was the worst of all. The staff decided we'd all sleep in the main hall together, safety in numbers. They posted 2 chaperones at the doors, kept lanterns burning all night, and told us everything would be fine. It wasn't. Sometime after 3 a.m., the lanterns began to flicker. The temperature plummeted again, and then the scratching started. Not at the doors, under the floorboards. Like something was crawling beneath us. The teachers shouted for everyone to stay calm, but panic spread fast. Then, without warning, a section of the floor near the fireplace buckled, and a hand pushed through. Gray skin, blackened nails. It clawed at the wood, splintering it apart. Students screamed and scrambled toward the exit, but the door slammed shut on its own. The lanterns went out. The only light came from the moon through the windows, and in that pale light I saw him again. The man from our cabin, Elias Crow or whatever he was, standing in the center of the room, head tilted, stitched grin stretching across his face. "You shouldn't have disturbed them," he rasped. His voice wasn't human. It was like 2 voices layered together. They belonged to me. Then nothing. Darkness. I don't remember screaming, but I must have. The next thing I knew, it was morning. Sunlight streamed through the windows. The floorboards were intact. The doors were open. And everyone was accounted for, except Brandon. They searched the entire village. No sign of him. No footprints, no belongings, nothing. He'd vanished without a trace. The police investigated for months. They interviewed all of us, searched every inch of Black Hollow, dredged the nearby river. They never found a single clue. It's been 8 years. Brandon was never found. I still dream about that stitched smile, about the voice that said they belonged to me. And every year on the anniversary of that trip, I find something on my porch. A small scrap of leather. Sometimes a button. Once a tooth. I don't know if it's Crow or someone else, but I do know this: we disturbed something that night. Something that was never meant to be touched. And I don't think it's finished with me yet. I don't talk about our senior hiking trip anymore. Most people in our town have chosen to forget it. Or they think it was just some tragic accident. But I was there. I know better. I saw what happened. And I still wake up some nights heart pounding, convinced that I hear screaming in the woods again. We were 17. It was supposed to be the perfect end to our final year. 3 days and 2 nights camping in Dead Elk Reserve, a sprawling wilderness preserve about 2 hours north of town. It was a tradition. Every graduating class went, accompanied by teachers and volunteer parents. We were told it was safe. No dangerous animals, no steep cliffs, no reason to worry. But the forest doesn't care about your safety, and neither do the people who decide to hide there. There were 31 of us in total, 26 students, 3 teachers, and 2 chaperones. I shared a tent with my best friend, Riley, and another kid named Jonah. We'd been friends since middle school, though Jonah had always been a little paranoid, the kind of guy who checked the tent zipper twice before sleeping and never strayed from the group. The first day was fine. The bus dropped us off at the trailhead, and we hiked 5 miles to a wide clearing by a creek where we set up camp. We cooked hot dogs, roasted marshmallows, and told stupid stories by the fire. Everything felt normal, until just before lights out. That's when we heard the whistle. It came from somewhere deep in the trees. 3 short notes, wee hoo wee, faint, almost playful. Probably another group camping, one of the teachers said, but it didn't sound like a camper's whistle. It sounded deliberate, intentional, like a signal. Jonah didn't sleep that night, neither did I. The next morning, we split into groups for a long hike. My group included Riley, Jonah, and 4 others. Our teacher, Mr. Clark, led the way. It was supposed to be a 4-hour loop trail, easy enough for beginners. But about 2 hours in, something strange happened. We found a shoe on the path. It was a woman's running shoe, small, dirty, and torn at the toe. Not one of ours. Mr. Clark shrugged it off as litter from a hiker, but Jonah crouched down and touched it. It was damp, fresh, like it hadn't been there long. Maybe someone's lost, Riley suggested. Then where's the other shoe? Jonah muttered. An hour later, we stumbled onto something worse. The trail narrowed through a dense patch of pines, and that's where we saw it. A piece of fabric caught on a branch. Torn denim. There were dark stains on it, almost black. Mr. Clark tried to convince us it was just mud. But even then, I knew it wasn't. We cut the hike short after that and headed back to camp. But the others hadn't fared much better. Another group claimed they'd seen someone watching them from behind a tree. A man in dark clothes who disappeared when they called out. The teachers insisted it was probably a ranger or another hiker. That night, the whistling came back, louder, closer. 3 notes over and over, echoing through the trees. Nobody slept. By the second night, tension was high. Mr. Clark and the other adults decided we'd leave a day early in the morning. But before that could happen, something terrible occurred. Jonah didn't show up for breakfast. At first, we thought he'd gone to the creek to brush his teeth. But his toothbrush was still in the tent. So were his boots. So was his phone. The only thing missing was him. Panic erupted. The teachers organized search teams, combing the woods around camp. We shouted his name until our voices went raw. Nothing. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. We contacted the park rangers by satellite phone. They told us to stay put and wait for their team. But the rangers didn't arrive until dusk. By then it was too late, because Jonah wasn't the only one gone. 2 more students, Heather and Sam, never returned from a short walk to collect firewood. They'd only been gone 10 minutes. They weren't even 50 yards from camp. And then, nothing. The rangers arrived with dogs and thermal drones. They found no tracks. No scent trail. No sign of struggle. It was like the forest had swallowed them whole. That night was chaos. Everyone huddled close around the fire, terrified to even use the bathroom alone. I couldn't shake the feeling we were being watched. And then, just past midnight, I saw it, a shape, far beyond the firelight, between two trees, motionless, human-sized, watching. I blinked, and it was gone. But I wasn't the only one who saw it. Riley grabbed my arm. "Tell me you saw that," we told Mr. Clark. He dismissed it as our imagination. But 20 minutes later, someone started whistling. 3 notes. Closer this time. Too close. The Rangers swept the perimeter. They found nothing. By morning, we were done. The trip was over. Buses were called. We were supposed to pack up and wait at the trailhead until help arrived. But we were missing 3 people, and every minute felt like an eternity. We started the hike back around 10 a.m., flanked by 2 Rangers with rifles. No one spoke. Every snapped twig made us jump. Every gust of wind felt like footsteps behind us. We were about 2 miles from the trailhead when Riley screamed. There, hanging from a low branch, was Jonah's jacket. It was shredded down the back like it had been cut with a knife. A few feet away, the torn remains of Heather's backpack. Inside were her notebooks, snacks, and phone, all smashed, and scrawled in the dirt beneath them were 3 words: "Don't look back." We ran. All of us. The teachers tried to keep order, but panic spread like fire. By the time we reached the trailhead, 1 kid had sprained his ankle. Another was hysterical, and half of us were crying. The police and search teams arrived within hours. They spent 3 weeks combing every inch of Dead Elk Reserve. Dogs, drones, helicopters, nothing. Jonah, Heather, and Sam were gone. The official story was that they'd gotten lost and succumbed to the elements. Maybe they fell into a ravine. Maybe an animal got them. That's what the press release said. That's what the school told our parents. But I know that's not what happened. Because 2 weeks after we got home, I found something in my mailbox. A scrap of denim with a dark stain, torn in the same way as the fabric we found on the trail. No note, no explanation, and every year since then, and without fail, I hear it. Somewhere near my house. On a windy night when the world is quiet, wee hoo wee, 3 short notes. I don't know who's whistling. I don't know what they want. But I do know this. Whatever happened in Dead Elk Reserve wasn't an accident, and they're not finished yet.